This, what we are talking about today, happens to the majority of people walking around on this beautiful floating rock that we call Earth. Discreetly and sneakily, just go with it, altering their current state health for the worst and decreasing their odds, likelihood, probability, whatever you want to call it, of longevity. Yeah, not cool. This is the modern metabolic conundrum of sarcobesity. Let me guess, you never heard of sarcobesity, have you? Well, you happen to click on the right, odd, weird, hopefully interesting, and highly sarcastic video. What is up? My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, and I will be Sherpa-ing you through this informative, sarcastic journey. Today we are here to talk about this very common and highly preventable longevity liability. A condition that's prevalence throughout modern day society puts the age-old debate finally to rest, confirming that if you do not use it, you will in fact lose it. And to be clear, I'm talking about muscle mass, so hopefully my production team hasn't put any inappropriate emojis up on the screen. What was that? They put a pickle? Unbelievable. Anywho, today we are talking about how this natural deterioration of muscle mass, known as sarcopenia, has joined forces with one of the most prevalent metabolic conditions across the world, obesity, to form a 1-2 kick in the longevity, you know what, known as sarcobesity, which is a straight up longevity killer. So we're going to tackle this conversation in the following way. First, break down the components of sarcobesity, then talk about why it's so prevalent, highlighting why it is so dangerous, and finally strategies to kick it in the you know what. Now you can put up the pickle, production team. Thank you. So let's get kicking. What is sarcobesity? As I alluded to before, this play on words defines a common phenomenon that occurs to the majority of the population as they age. It is the combined increase in both the conditions of sarcopenia and obesity. Now, most of you know or have a general idea of what obesity is, but just so we're on the same page, and as a quick refresher, it is the broad term used to define having too much body fat, to the extent where it is likely impacting one's cellular and metabolic health. This is unfortunately becoming more and more prevalent in the modern world, as the latest data shows that nearly half the United States population is obese, with north of 70% being overweight. These are staggering numbers, which continue to go in the wrong direction. No, production team, I said wrong direction. You see what I have to deal with? And although the debate continues and will probably keep continuing around the causal relationship between obesity and modern metabolic disease, there's no denying that an association is very, very real. Modern day chronic conditions such as type 2 diabetes, hypertension, cancer, neurodegeneration, liver disease, and cardiovascular disease are all more prevalent in the obese demographic. All of which, might I add, are also longevity impairing, meaning that they not only probably impact one's lifespan, but they also impact one's health span as well, which are the years of one's life that they are truly healthy. Being able to do all the things that they truly love, that fill them up and make them happy, with zero limitations. And isn't that what it's really all about? Pretty important years, if you ask me. Now, on the other side of sarcobesity, we have sarcopenia, which is the natural deterioration of muscle as we age. And here's why you should care about this, no matter what age you are. Peak skeletal muscle is generally attained during the first 3 decades of one's life. And from that point on, it begins to decline slowly and barely noticeably for the remainder of one's lifespan. Essentially, this means for the average Joe and Jane living the normal Western lifestyle, muscle mass is slowly lost from about age 30 on. And I want to reiterate, when I say slowly, I mean barely noticeable for the average non-gym rat earthwalker. Now here are two key pieces of information that magnify the risk for the older population. First, this muscle loss has been shown to accelerate by 1% per year after the age of 65. And second, if left to its own devices, it is associated with a 2 to 3-fold loss in strength. To say these numbers were a little shocking and eye-opening would be a fair assessment. But as Will Ferrell once said,
"We can't have anyone freak out there, okay? We've got to keep our composure."
Because we're going to talk about the ways to sway the muscle mass odds ever in your favor. But before we get there, we need to walk through why this combo of decreased muscle mass and increased adiposity or obesity is a straight up longevity killer. This killer combo, in a bad way. The interesting and scary thing here is that these two independent conditions tend to stem from many of the same cellular and metabolic disrupting lifestyle habits. Lack of exercise, excess energy consumption specifically from ultra-processed foods, micronutrient deficiency, low quality sleep, circadian rhythm disruption, excess stress, chronic inflammation, environmental toxins, and insufficient nature. This cocktail of subpar conditions nurtures a cellular and metabolic state where one is not only losing muscle mass, but simultaneously gaining fat mass. And the data has shown that greater fat mass may also exacerbate sarcopenia because lipid accumulation prevents both amino acid incorporation and reduces protein synthesis in skeletal muscle. Yikes. But this makes sense because we know that skeletal muscle is critical for metabolic health. It plays a fundamental role in both whole body glucose disposal and insulin sensitivity, as well as being absolutely critical for mobility and functional capacity, aka being strong enough to do everyday things like sit, stand, crawl, crouch, walk upstairs, run from a bear. Wait, what was that last one? Things that are required to live an unassisted life. And the scary part of all this is how unnoticeable this muscle to fat shift can be when spread across several decades. It can be quite deceiving, and here's why. When you combine the deterioration of muscle mass with the accumulation of fat, an individual can appear to keep a somewhat consistent physical stature over 10, 20, 30 years. For example, their waist, arm, or thigh circumference could be visibly similar and measure within a relative range over the course of 20, 30 years. But if one were to do a DEXA body scan and map out the fat and muscle once a year, they would most likely see the ratio of muscle to fat shift, and not in the direction that they probably want it to shift. This brings up an important point about metabolic dysfunction, and it's a pretty obvious yet often overlooked concept. When there's dysfunction within, it doesn't always show itself in a clear and concise manner. In fact, it rarely does. And when you add in the fact that more total fat typically means an increase in visceral fat as well, or the deep abdominal fat that accumulates in and around our organs, secreting inflammatory molecules and adding fuel to the metabolic fire, all of a sudden the aging gracefully NFT you just purchased gets rug pulled. And when you take a step back and you look at the holistic picture of the metabolic dysfunction, the increased disease prevalence, and loss of functional capacity and mobility, all as a byproduct of sarcobesity, it's all of a sudden not that big of a surprise that complications from falls are one of the leading causes of death for the older population. So, with all that, how do we kick sarcobesity right in the pickle and improve our odds of longevity? Is it, oh, what? Now you don't show the emoji? Unbelievable. Prevention and reversal. In an ideal world, we want to have a solid foundation of skeletal muscle and a healthy layer of subcutaneous fat. This combo, when balanced, is a solid longevity recipe. But if you happen to be like the majority of the population, there's probably some improvement that we can all make. In which case, the most likely strategy for the greater population not everyone, would probably focus on increasing muscle mass and decreasing excess fat stores. And before you say it, I know, it is a lot easier said than done. That's why before we even get to some of the other tips and strategies, it needs to be made clear that the most optimal strategy is prevention. The easiest way to avoid this sarcobesity phenomenon is to establish consistent routines around training and nourishment over the course of those first 3 decades of life. Consistently using it so you never lose it. So if you're lucky enough to be in that age bracket right here, right now, I urge you to start today. Your future self will be doing backflips with praise, or literal, like backflips. You might be doing literal backflips. All that being said, we gotta be realists here too, and understand that many of us do not have our health awakening until somewhere around midlife. And listen, that is still unbelievably awesome, because an awakening means you've undergone a realization and established or begun to establish intention for change. So here are some tips to help you create your optimal game plan. First, understand that you are playing the long game here. The goal should be sustainable change, not a quick, unsustainable fix. Another important mentality here is to understand that weight loss isn't the ultimate goal. Longevity is. Just losing weight via a caloric restriction diet probably isn't going to get you where you ultimately want to get. In fact, many studies have shown that caloric restriction in the absence of exercise results in a more than desired loss of lean tissue mass. And we know the last thing that we want to do is lose more of the already scarce lean tissue. On the flip side, studies that have incorporated dietary restriction with an exercise regimen have resulted in better outcomes in regards to losing weight and maintaining muscle mass compared to those with diet or exercise modifications alone. So the magic combo here seems to be high quality food with a good, complete protein source and a consistent use of those muscles. The more you move in an intentional and methodical way, the greater lengths your body is going to go to preserve that tissue. This is actually a tactic that I use when I'm intermittent fasting or doing a prolonged fast. I make sure that I continue to strength train to minimize the muscle atrophy that goes along with not consuming any food. So, depending on your fitness level, aiming for somewhere around 2 to 4 30-minute aerobic sessions of moderate exercise per week. Think power walking, jogging, elliptical, biking, stationary bike, working just hard enough where it would be difficult to have a conversation with someone, and 2 to 3 strength-focused sessions per week as a solid goal to work your way up to and mix with your newly improved eating and lifestyle habits. And if you need some hints and places to start, we got a ton of videos. Post them up here, post them below, check out the playlist. They're all over the place, 100 plus. And if you're interested in a specific topic, let me know in the comments below. I'll point you in the right direction, or try. Maybe say a joke as well. The key here is to dip your toes in the longevity water nice and slow, and methodically ramp up the protocols along the way. Because there is no one size fits all when it comes to getting healthy. Everyone's ideal protocols are different because we are all, in fact, different. Who would have thunk? So loop in your team of medical and health professionals and build the strategy which best fits you, your current state, and your goals. And remember, hope itself is not a strategy, at least one that I would put my longevity money on. So own that shit and kick the longevity killer, Sarcobesity, right in the, yeah. Thanks, production team.